Howdy folks, it's Adriel the Hunting Gear Guy, and this is a Savage 64 Takedown. Well, at least it will be in just a minute. If you can give me just a minute. Let's put this thing together. So inside the case, we've got the gun strapped to one side, and we've got the barrel in another. So there's half of the gun, and the other half is just in here. So let me put that crappy case to the side here. Now, the go together, in the manual it says to pull the bolt back a little bit as you put this in. I haven't really felt the need, so I won't. I just pop it in there and then just turn that locking ring. You can kind of hear that ratcheting. It's just ratcheting against this plastic bit on the bottom there. And you go till snug, and there you have it. So there's our assembled Savage 64 Takedown. You can see that there's not really much of a forend. You just kind of grab it right here, and that's basically it. That's how you handle this rifle. So let's check to make sure that we're empty. So our mag's empty, our chamber's empty. Let's take a closer look at this thing. So just starting from the rear here, we've just got a standard plastic butt plate. We don't need a rubber one, so we're just shooting 22s. We've got some steel sling swivels, which is kind of nice. A lot of newer rifles have gone to the molded-in plastic ones, which aren't really that fantastic. I prefer the old steel ones. The stock itself is very cheap feeling, very cheap fitting, and it's not going to win any awards for looks on it, but it is functional. Specifically, I think that the lines with the receiver and the stock are just so horribly not matched. It almost looks like the receiver doesn't belong in this rifle. Moving forward, we've got our trigger down here, safety up there. There it's on fire, there it's on safe. So when you see the red, that means dead. The trigger itself is a 2-stage, kind of creepy, 4.5 pound trigger. So there's our first stage. Second stage, as we get into it, you'll just see it moves just a little bit and then it fires. So personally, I think the trigger's fine. Like for a rifle like this, nothing wrong with it. Just the top of the receiver, when you buy it, doesn't have these Weaver bases on it. It's just a standard round top. Unlike the regular Savage 64, they have gotten rid of the dovetail top, and now they just have it drilled and tapped, which I think is a good idea because these are more secure than dovetail mounts. If you're looking to put these on yours, these are a Weaver 16, so that's what you'll need front and back to put bases on this rifle. Now the bolt itself is just this free spinning doohickey on the side here. You can lock it in position right there. You just pull it back to that spot and then push it in, and that'll lock the bolt open. Or you can pull it out to relieve it. The spring in there is like a double recoil spring style, so this first part is quite light, and then pretty hard second one there. I actually had a couple of failures, I believe, because of that, because it did short stroke on it. And I think it was that second stage there on there, which it might be pushing down a hammer. It might be a different part of the spring. I don't know. I haven't taken a look into it just yet. I guess we'll take a look into it. We've got this rear sight here. It's ramped, so if you're shooting close-up stuff, you leave the ramp to the lowest point. If you're going to shoot some stuff that's far away, just put that ramp in a little bit higher, and that raises that rear sight. If you are going to put a scope on this thing, you may want to drift this out. So what you can do is just knock it, take this piece out here, and then you can drift it with a brass punch or something like that, and drift it out of the little dovetail that it's in. Finally, we've got a front sight. It's, I guess if you need to adjust for windage, you could pound it one way or the other. And not really much of a crown. It's beveled a little bit. Like, I don't know if you can see that there, but it's a tiny little bit of an angle in. So, close enough. Now, the mags on these things, like a lot of 22s, are pretty bad. Like, I don't know what it is with 22s. The mags are bad on most of them. With this one, it's got a very weird, like the catch is in front there. So what you need to do is kind of get the nose of the magazine in and push that thing up and then get it out of the way. Taking it out is pretty easy. If you've got some good grip strength, you just push forward with your index finger and take it out. Kid's not going to be able to do that, but an adult would be just fine with that. Kid might have to use two hands to pull it out. But again, a lot of 22s have pretty bad mag releases too. You look at the Marlin 795. It's a two-handed affair for kids, and so will this. Now, taking this thing down, it's not quite as fast as the Ruger 1022 takedown, but it's pretty quick. Pretty quick to pull that guy off, and really not too much to it. I would say that just looking in here, this is where some of the fit and finish starts to look pretty crappy. So let me just get a little bit of light on this. And if you can see on the inside there, it's pretty. It looks like the machine work wasn't quite done on it. It's very ratchety and raggedy and just not fantastic. Which, who cares? That part you don't get to at all. I have managed to pinch my fingers a couple of times torquing this thing on, just because of the gap in there is just perfect to kind of snag your finger skin in there, which again is not really a major complaint. It's just the finishing work could be a little bit nicer. All right, now to take this thing apart, I've got my 5/32 Allen key. When you just get this thing from the factory, these bolts may be too light. They might actually not be very snug in there at all. So definitely take a look at that, because that will affect your accuracy on this thing. The first Savage 64 I had, not the Takedown model, the regular model, screws were just way too light. I took it to the range, I shot it for accuracy, and it was horrible. Like, I expected the accuracy to not be that great, but it was really, really bad. And then I looked online and I tried to find why the accuracy might be bad, and I found some people mention that the action screws need to be torqued down to a certain spec. And some people get fancy with this. I just torqued them to torqued, and much better accuracy out of it. Still not fantastic, but better than nothing. So once our action screws are out, we can pull this guy off, and we're left with this lovely. Now, this isn't a super straightforward takedown. You'll need a couple of bits for it. I've got my 1/4-inch drive here. That'll take out this guy right here. And there's also a block here that comes out once you've got that loose. Next, I'm going to use the same driver on this back guy here. Stuff's all going to come out to get this bolt out. It's not a great design for that reason. Now I'm going to swap over to a Phillips number 2. I'm going to get this guy right here. When you're putting that Phillips back in, do it by hand so you get those first couple of threads in there before you go to the screwdriver, because the screwdriver, it's got like the head on it is really nice and it'll want to lock in, but you won't be able to get it at the angle in there, and it won't want to thread for you. There comes that screw. There's our magazine well. A couple of the screws that go in the back here have these little lock washers. So if you're wondering what those are for, that's what those are doing. Now I need to get the ejector out, so I'm going to move my bolt to the rear and just lock it. You don't have to do that, but I like to relieve the pressure on that ejector and just keep everything out of the way. That's a flathead screw on the side, and it's a tiny little guy. Don't lose that one. Don't lose that little screw. Here comes our ejector. There's our fixed ejector. And now this bolt should be ready to come out. So we just loosen her, and out she comes. There's the bolt handle, and the bolt just comes by flying it out the front there. So there's our bolt, and the firing pin just kind of loosely sits on top there. If you need to put it back in, it goes in just like so. And that's our firing pin. And it just acts on the bolt face there. Now the recoil spring is kind of interesting. It's a dual coil, and it telescopes into the bolts just like that, and then just has that rod sticking out the back. So kind of a neat design on that recoil spring. Now in terms of training regiment, there's not really much to clean around the bolt except for the bolt face. If you have a pick or something like that, like a dental pick, you might want to get under that extractor every once in a while and just keep that bolt face clean. It's nice that the firing pin just kind of flops out, because that if you get too much oil in your firing pin channel, especially on a 22, then you go shoot on a really cold day, and a cold day in Canada, northern Alberta, it won't shoot, and most guns won't do that, and that's because won't shoot because the firing pin channel on a 22 is pretty big. If there's any oil in there, you'll start to get condensation, it'll freeze, and then your firing pin won't go anywhere when you strike it. So I like that it's easy to get to that, especially shooting in Canada here. All right, I've got it all reassembled. Now this isn't a bit, well, that is a big complaint. It's an annoyance. I got to use like 4 bits to make this work. I've got to use my what is this, 3/8, 5/32 for the bottom action screws. I got to use this Phillips for that one screw in the middle there. I got to use a flathead for the ejector on the side, and I got to use my 1/4 inch to get a couple of those other ones in there. Not ideal for a takedown, especially like getting down to your bolt is something that you're gonna have to do with your 22. Lead shavings, carbon, it builds up in there, it gets underneath the extractor, and eventually stuff starts to not work. So you need to get into your bolt to clean it, and it's a pain in the butt to get into this thing. This is probably one of the worst designs for 22s to try to get the bolt out. So how's the accuracy in this thing? Well, I both took it to the range and took it out hunting. Here's the range trip. Now this was at about 25. No, sorry, this was at 50 yards. And I've got two different styles of ammo that I was shooting. One was bucket of bullets. That's the group here and there. And the other one was with some SK rifles, or SK Standard, which is pretty good stuff. And that's what we're seeing over here. So accuracy is not great, and you know, a lot of these takedowns don't have fantastic accuracy because they're just dealing with more stress on them and whatnot. But the Savage 64 is just not a super accurate rifle. I just didn't get a very good accuracy from the last one either. This was running a scope as well. Now, I did run irons on it, and it was accurate enough for rabbits, so which was actually pretty handy. Taking this thing out into the bush and then just using the iron sights and shooting small game with it was actually pretty good. It's very compact, fits into that pack. The weight, 4.5 pounds, isn't bad. Like there's some rifles like that Mossberg Plinkster is lighter than this, but it's also like even shittier built than this one is, and this is pretty chinsily built. One thing I wanted to say: this case is too big. This, for how big this rifle packs down, this case is too large and too bulky for what it's supposed to do. So I think this was just like an inexpensive Uncle Mike's that they branded, but this pocket up here is supposed to be for the barrel, and it's huge. You could fit 2 or 3 barrels in there. Why is this so big? That's kind of interesting. The other thing I found, okay, fantastic. You can strap it to the edge there, and it's got a little bit of padding on the sides. You know where it doesn't have any padding? Right on the bottom here, which is where you put the rifle down if you're carrying it. So if you carry it and put it down somewhere, there's just like a thin layer of nylon there. There's no padding on the bottom, padding on the sides, no padding on the top, because that's where the zipper is. So this thing is poorly designed, in my opinion, and it's not a big deal. You can get another one of these packs somewhere else, and you can get this rifle down to a much smaller size in volume, which would matter if you're going to go backpacking or something like that. That's what this rifle is for. Taking out backpacking, taking out to go hiking and that kind of thing. So a small volume would be handy. This is not as small a volume as it could be. Now, one thing, it does carry really nicely. They've got straps on the side here, which actually makes it really nicely to just throw over your shoulder. It's just bigger than it needs to be. It's just way bigger than it needs to be. It's got this ginormous pocket on the side here, which you could use to carry ammo or something, but it doesn't seal very well. So even putting a magazine in this one pocket here is kind of risky because it might just fall out there. So when I carried this one, I popped the magazine in and then just strapped it really well to in there so that the magazine wouldn't be the first thing to hit. But Not super impressed with the case. I think you can do better than this. So would I recommend the Savage 64 Takedown? It depends on what you're looking for. This is the cheapest takedown you can get. There are no cheaper takedowns. So it's got that going for it. It is the cheapest. Um, is it a good shooter? Not really. Like I would say that the accuracy isn't that great. I did have a couple of stoppages running it, and it's got this very stiff bolt to actuate, so that might cause issues as well with cycling and that kind of thing. So food for thought there. The takedown is horrible. It's got a horrible takedown to get to your bolt there. This guy here taking this barrel off, I thought it was fine. I worried a little bit about the little plastic nubbin that is acting against the this nut here. But it's probably fine. It's probably going to last for a while. It's just the rest of it, like getting down to the bolt, is a pain in the butt and that kind of thing. Now, if you do intend to use the scope mounts on here, you are definitely going to need a cheek rest. I found with this thing, I don't even get a great cheek weld, just using the irons. So my cheek is already off the stock. You can see there, I'm like, this is all my weight, and I'm about an inch too low. So you're going to need a cheek rest of some kind on here. Definitely if you're going to use the scope, maybe if you're going to use the irons. If you're going to go out like small game hunting, like you could probably do without and just kind of just push your cheek up against the side there and it'll probably be fine. But if you're going to do any serious shooting with this thing, or if you're going to like customize it just for you, definitely get like one of those strap-on cheek rests or some foam or something like that for the back here. So how does this rifle compare to its competitors? I've had one of the Marlin Papooses. This barrel nut system is better than the Papoose because it stays tight. It didn't loosen on me. One of the issues with the Papoose is if you just hand tighten it, it slowly creeps out on you, and they include a wrench. So their pack, which is way better designed than this one, comes with a little wrench, and if you wrench down on that barrel nut, it won't come loose. This one just doesn't come loose, which I think is better. It's because it's hand tightable, hand tightenable. You tighten it with your hand, and it's tight, and it just stays that way. And that's one thing that I think is better on the Savage. I would say the mags aren't a super highlight. The takedown is horrible. The trigger's okay. And I think if you were to use this for small game hunting, it would be an okay rifle, especially okay for the price. And I think that's the real thing to take into consideration here is that this is a low price takedown. And for that reason, if you're very budget limited, then maybe take a look at the Savage 64 Takedown. Thanks for watching.